What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are going to be talking about 3 running back matchups that I like this week, who I will be starting in my fantasy football leagues, and 3 matchups that I don't really like this week, and players that I might consider sitting. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into my 3 must-starts, and we're going to be starting over here with Buffalo Bills running back James Cook. And I think James Cook is going to be a top 5 play in PPR leagues this week. He gets a matchup against the Miami Dolphins. And as we look at this matchup here, it does have the highest projected game total for the week. The game total is 54 points here. And we're projecting a lot of scoring here in this matchup. Now, as we look at James Cook and some of the production that he's given us over the last couple weeks, 10 fantasy points in week 1, 19 in week 2, and 13 in week 3, he's consistently finishing as a top 20 back, but he is getting a very healthy workload. We're seeing 15-ish carries a game, and then we're also seeing anywhere between 3 to 5 targets per game for James Cook. So I think in a matchup where we're expecting a lot of scoring, potentially a lot of usage, I think James Cook is going to be a very good play for your fantasy football leagues this week, and I think he does have that top 5 upside for you in week 4. Now, the second running back that I'm going to be starting in my leagues this week is going to be running back DeAndre Swift for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Swift is going to be a top 12 play for your fantasy football leagues this week. He gets a matchup against the Washington Commanders, and this game does look like it's going to be heavily controlled by the Philadelphia Eagles. The game total in this one is going to be 43 points. The Eagles are expected to win by a heavy margin here, so we are expecting a lot of running from the Eagles as they get up, they slow down the game script, and they just start grinding out the clock. So I think DeAndre Swift could be utilized a lot in this one. One thing that we should know about DeAndre Swift is week 1, he obviously didn't play very much, but week 2, he finished as a top 5 running back, and in week 3, he also finished as a top 15 running back. So ever since DeAndre Swift started seeing some work, he's been good for fantasy football. And I think one of the most unique things about DeAndre Swift is really they're using him on the ground. He's getting a lot of rushing attempts, but they're really not using him in the passing game. So I think this is going to be interesting to see throughout the rest of the season. Watch how much they use DeAndre Swift in the passing game, because if they start unlocking that aspect of DeAndre Swift, the fantasy ceiling can go even higher. But I think this game, it's going to be a lot of rushing. We know DeAndre Swift is super efficient on the ground. Last week, 16 carries for 130 yards. The week before, 28 carries for 175 yards. He's going to do something similar this week. I'm not going to say he's going for 175 yards, and I think he's going to crack that century mark with his rushing yardage, and I think we should be expecting a low-end running back 1 for fantasy football. Now, my third and final start of the week is going to be Kenneth Walker, running back for the Seattle Seahawks, and I think Kenneth Walker is going to be a low-end running back 1, a top 12 play in your fantasy football leagues again this week as well. I love the matchup against the New York Giants. The Giants have been bleeding points to the fantasy football running back position, so we're expecting a lot of work from Kenneth Walker here, and this is going to be our Monday night game. Like I said, they play the Giants. Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross, both the starting tackles for the Seahawks, are going to be out in this one, but they've been out for the last couple weeks now, so Kenneth Walker has still been producing with them out. I think he will still produce in this one as well. We're projecting somewhat of a competitive game here, so I think that there is a chance for touchdowns for Kenneth Walker. We've seen him do it over the last couple weeks, and I think that is going to continue. Again, with the utilization that he's been getting, 17 and 18 carries over the last couple weeks, touchdown potential, and then obviously finishing as a top 15 running back in both of these last 2 weeks. I think it's going to be more of the same for Kenneth Walker. The matchup's good. He's going to be a low-end RB1 in your lineups. But now that we've talked about running backs that I like this week, let's talk about some of the running backs I don't like, and we're going to start with Kansas City Chiefs running back Isiah Pacheco. And Pacheco gets a matchup here against the New York Jets. The Kansas City Chiefs are projected to win this one pretty heavily. I mean, when you look at the projected total, it is a low projected total at 41.5, but the Chiefs are 9-point favorites in this one, so we are expecting them to get up early, and that is expected to remain the same for the majority of the game. Now, that does mean that they could lean on Isiah Pacheco, and they could use him as they try and drain out the clock, but I think the reality is that Isiah Pacheco hasn't been very reliable for fantasy football. When we look at the last few weeks, he's really not cracking the top 30. Last week, he finished as a top 12, but in week 1, he was 30, and then week 2, he was 29. So he's really not doing a ton for your fantasy football teams. he just is a very touchdown dependent option. It seems like when Isiah Pacheco doesn't fall into the end zone, he is going to be below 10 points for your fantasy football teams. But if he does fall into the end zone, it's a player that, with a touchdown could be 12 to 15 points. It's just not a very high upside play. And for me, he's sitting outside of my top 25 running backs this week. So I think there are going to be other options that we can start and other options that we can play. Even if you're playing him in a flex, I think there's some wide receivers I would rather play. So I think Isiah Pacheco, for me, is a guy that I would look and explore my other options. Now, the second player that I'm going to consider sitting in my fantasy football leagues is going to be Najee Harris for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Najee is on the road at the Houston Texans this week. This game is projected to be fairly low scoring as well. When we look at the projected game total, it is sitting at 42.5 points. It should be somewhat competitive though. Neither of these teams have been very good for the most part, but James Daniel, the guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is going to be out in this one, so they will be without an offensive lineman, and that does kind of suck because Najee Harris hasn't been getting a lot of time anyways. The offensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers has been pretty poor so far this year, and obviously they're going to be without Deontay Johnson in this one as well. They have been for the last couple of weeks. But I think the majority of the reason why I don't trust Najee Harris and why I'm not really excited to put him into my fantasy football lineups is, so far this year, the best weekly finish for Najee Harris has been running back 38 on the week, and that was last week. He had 19 carries, which got him to that running back 38 mark, and he's just not very explosive. He's not getting a lot of yards per carry. He's not being used in the receiving game. There's not a lot of touchdown opportunities for the Steelers, and really the main thing that's keeping me from trusting Najee Harris is that the Pittsburgh Steelers are starting to utilize Jaylen Warren more and more every week. It does seem like this is going to be a committee where it's almost getting to the point where it's almost a 50-50 split. And with a 50-50 split, this offense just isn't efficient enough. They don't score enough to where Najee Harris can be reliable. And for me, I think at the moment in time, he is probably a sit most weeks. And this week for me, he's sitting outside of those top 25 running backs, and I don't expect a really big week from Najee Harris. And now the third and final running back that I'm going to be sitting this week in my fantasy football leagues is going to be Dameon Pierce for the Houston Texans. And we just talked about Najee Harris, but Dameon Pierce, he gets to play the Pittsburgh Steelers and gets to play against Najee Harris this week. And again, we don't really need to talk about the game total. It's a low scoring game, projected to be a low scoring game. Both of these offenses aren't great. In fact, I think the Texans offense is better than what the Steelers offense has been so far. But I think what it comes down to with Dameon Pierce is, again, this is a bad game total. And when you look at the last couple weeks for Dameon Pierce, he is just like I said with some of these other guys. Isiah Pacheco's touchdown dependent. Najee Harris has been touchdown dependent. Dameon Pierce is the same thing. He's going to be touchdown dependent. So in the weeks so far this year that Dameon Pierce has scored a touchdown, he's been startable. The weeks he doesn't score a touchdown, he's been unstartable. And so you look at the finishes so far this year: running back 41 week 1, running back 42 week 3, and running back 14 last week when he fell into the end zone against Jacksonville. That game was somewhat surprising because they did blow out the Jaguars, and it was a positive game script for Dameon Pierce. I don't necessarily expect the same thing here in this one. I do think the Texans can win this game, but I expect this to be a lot more competitive than their game was last week. Pierce is fairly safe, man. When you look at the utilization, it's always very, very consistent. He's getting about 12 to 15 carries a week. He's seeing about 2 to 3 targets a week. So it's just not a lot of utilization for Dameon Pierce. It's fairly average for the most part, and the offense is fairly average for the most part as well. Again, he's a touchdown dependent option, and this week I just don't really want to start him. I think there's plenty of other options we can use, and he's going to be sitting outside of my top 25 running backs on the week as well. All right, guys, that is all I have for you guys today. So if you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button down below. It is the best free way to show our channel support, so I would appreciate each and every one of you guys going and doing that for me. If you also enjoy content like this and you want more content like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We make content like this every day, so there's more of this coming. Just make sure you're subscribed so you get it in your inbox. And then also, if you want to talk fantasy football with me, with a community that we've built over at the League FFB, get advice on waivers, trades, start-sit decisions, all of that stuff for fantasy football and NFL, go ahead and join my free Discord. It is going to be linked in the description. And like I said, it is free to join, so there's no risk in joining that as well. And with all of that being said, I don't have anything else for you guys today. I will see you on the next video. Peace out.